Yeah. So well, okay. It's about 7:30. We have some people here, so I think we can go ahead and start with the presentation. Gosh, I haven't done this kind of stuff in so long. But yes, if you have any questions as we're talking about a topic, by all means, feel free to throw them in chat. I'll do my best to answer them. I am by no means an expert. I need to make that very clear. I have a wealth of wrestling knowledge. Most of it is in passing. My time in trying to become a pro wrestler, I spent a lot of time trying to look at stuff and understand it. But there will always be people that know more than me, and I can be wrong. It may be wrong information, but it will be here to will be a pop quiz. The pop quiz will be just having a good time. The question will be, did you enjoy this? No? Well, then I fucked up and I failed as a teacher. If it's yes, then you pass with glowing colors either way. So, yeah, so welcome to Pro Wrestling 101, an intro to the work of pro wrestling. What is pro wrestling? That is always the first question that we're going to ask here. Well, by definition, professional wrestling, the noun, is a type of entertainment involving wrestling matches whose progress and outcome are planned in advance, typically between performers with established character roles. What does that mean? Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can say it's a long-running live-action stunt show with multiple ongoing storylines. It's not the same as Olympic wrestling, but there are a lot of roots in there. It's a global spectacle with widespread impact. Some of the most common things you hear is that it's a soap opera for men, or the people that don't like wrestling that want to try and degrade it will say it's just dudes in their underwear hugging each other. This is one of the first things I heard about when I had any inkling of what professional wrestling was people described it as the dudes in their underwear hugging each other, and I was like, well, that sounds dumb. I'm never going to do that. And I was proven to be extremely wrong in that case. So, again, based off of the information, it is... Oh, no, let's see. How do I want to phrase these things? Okay, that's the next slide, right? Yes. So, saying all this and kind of describing what it is, everyone has the same question. Is wrestling fake? Or people say wrestling is fake. The answer to that question is yes, but also no. Wrestling is fake is, in fact, the oldest and probably the most annoying comeback to anyone who enjoys wrestling. It's mainly used to try and shame someone for enjoying wrestling in any way, shape, or form. But that's just a dick move, to be real honest. It is true that the matches are predetermined and that wrestlers are playing characters, but this is no different than any type of TV show, any kind of play, stuff like this. It's very often used, again, to try and dismay us, but then we're like, do you watch Game of Thrones? Do you watch any Jason Statham movie? You know Jason Statham's going to shoot someone and probably come out victorious in the end. Many of the moves are designed to look like they hurt more, and but they are... moves are usually designed to look like they hurt more than they actually do. Punches are kind of pulled, or they're more like stage punches, and a wrestler's job is usually to protect their opponent. Some props are designed to help not hurt wrestlers, such as you smash someone with like this big trophy. Most of the parts of the trophies are sawed mostly the way through, so that when you hit them, it collapses. Things like that. However, pro wrestling it involves extremely athletic performers, and they do get hurt. This is not safe. They often say things like, this is not ballet. This is a very dangerous type of situation. The ring provides very little padding, and you are still falling, slamming, hitting, and more to the people you work with. The chairs, the foldable chairs, are real metal chairs that you can pick up at Walmart or anywhere else. The tables that they have, the folding tables, are real tables. They're not gimmicked. They're not like, ooh, it's cardboard. No, they're actual wooden tables. The injuries can be very real. The performers have one shot to do something live on TV with no real do-over. If something happens, things have to change on the fly. By that, I mean, when you watch any kind of movie or TV show, if someone messes up, they just do a retake. If you're watching something live, it's a one-shot. If you go to jump and hit your person and you miss, you can't exactly redo that, and you have to kind of call things on the fly. I'm also rushing. This is what I'm really good at, is running through things. So, this is the question that we get asked the most. If you say, at any point you say you're a wrestling fan, someone has to say, is it fake, or you know wrestling is fake, right? And again, I say this is the oldest and most annoying comeback to anyone who enjoys wrestling. And it's usually just meant to demean anyone who likes anything. It's like watching any kind of animation and someone saying, you know, it's for kids, right? Even if, whether it is or it's not. And it is something to keep in mind that it's just something you don't know. It is still a TV show. It is not a traditional sport event. It is a. This is why WWE is now World Wrestling Entertainment. It is a sports entertainment franchise or activity. So I mentioned WWE, and it kind of comes to this. When it comes to the different leagues of wrestling, some of these are very generic terms. For example, the major leagues, WWE. This is the one that everyone knows, whether it's WWE, WWF, WWF. At the time, for a while, there was WCW. Back in the day, wrestling federations they were territorial. You had certain portions of the country before WWE kind of bought all of them and kind of became this countrywide, international, global sensation. But that doesn't mean that they're the only ones or the thing that matters the most. They are not the end all be all. The quote unquote minor leagues are just anything that aren't really WWE. So you have things like AEW, All Elite Wrestling, Ring of Honor, and TNA, which is Total Nonstop Action, which was Impact, and then they came back to TNA recently. These are the ones where they're like, okay, if you're not in WWE and you want to be on TV and you want to be kind of like well known, you have these. All Elite was founded just a couple of years ago. Ring of Honor was considered an indie show, but they've been since kind of elevated. TNA for a long time was their biggest competitor, but even then, no one really reaches the same level of WWE in a lot of ways. Term you'll hear a lot is the indies. These are going to be smaller promotions. These are where you kind of like cut your teeth when you're starting to train. If you don't go straight through like a WWE program, you're doing a lot more of these small things. Like if you're seeing any kind of wrestling on like TikTok that isn't one of these main four companies, it's probably an indie show. You're gonna have things like Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, GCW, CZW, Pro Wrestling Noah. There are tons. Almost every state has at least a multitude of indie pro wrestlings. Countries have a multitude. Speaking of other countries, you'll have things like, again, country-wise, Mexico. Their two biggest ones are AAA and CMLL. This is where you see a lot of the lucha libre style of stuff that's they've been doing in the country for years and years and years, decades. But these are the two main ones that you're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff. And Japan. You have New Japan, you have All Japan. Stardom is an all-women's one as well. Uh-oh, rip bad. We'll give it a hot second for the ads to get through. Because Lord knows I am also rushing. So let's go ahead and just say... Boy, tragic getting an ad for Cleveland, Ohio. That place sucks. As much as I appreciate ad revenue. And I'm back. Not sure about tragic. Oh, never mind. The ads. They never stop. That's just funny. Alright, Tragic is back. That's good. Okay. Neon's back as well. Alright, so, yeah. So we'll just kind of ad done for me. Woohoo! Alright, so we got pretty much... I'm sure Star is floating around somewhere. So you have Japan as well with like New Japan, All Japan. Stardom is one of their popular all-female federations, so I wanted to make sure that I threw that in there as well. There is a bonus for backyard wrestling. This is just all unsanctioned stuff. These are people who are trying to get into wrestling, but they can't. They're either too young to get into a school, they haven't afford, there's nothing by them, or they just really like that backyard style where everything is like hodgepodge. It's very like rednecked together. Things are very unregulated. It tends to lean more towards the hardcore style, or you're like 16 in a backyard using a trampoline, trying to do your best to live out your dream. I would have no knowledge of that whatsoever, unless there was video evidence of this that could be done during a community night on Discord, where you can watch some of my old matches in the backyard when I was like 16. But yeah, that's crazy talk. So there are plenty of options if you're looking to get into wrestling. Some people stick in one country forever. Some people stick in the quote-unquote minor leagues forever. Some people stick in the indies forever. Some people start and end in WWE. The footage is glorious. Yeah, so yeah, Stardom is neat. I think they just got new management. So wherever you are in this, everyone has different goals of where they want to be. There are options for if let's say WWE releases you, you can either go back to the indies, because that's where you wanted to get, you had a lot of love for it. You can try and get into one of the minor leagues. You can go to another country and start cutting your teeth there, because they all have drastically different styles. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So just as a quick thing, there are a couple of terms that you'll hear that are parts of the ring that you may not know. I didn't animate this whatsoever. So I meant to do that. Oh well, you're stuck with what we have here. So clearly, one of the most obvious ones is the mat. As we can see here, it's labeled the mat. It is the flat part center of the ring. The whole thing is the wrestling ring, aka the squared circle. Terms that you're going to hear, such as turnbuckle, is the corner. Corner of the ring is often referred to as the turnbuckle or the corner. The term turnbuckle refers to the screw that is in the middle between the turnbuckle pad and the corner where the ropes are, and the ring post, which you can see here. I point at the posts. These are both referenced pretty often, whether it is wrestlers taking the turnbuckle cover off, hitting a turnbuckle. The turnbuckle and the ring post is where the tag rope is kept. This is a little piece of string that a tag partner has to hold in order to be eligible to be tagged by the partner in a tag match. The ring apron refers to two different things. It refers to between the rope and the outside edge of... I never noticed the irony of calling the ring, calling it a ring, and it has four corners. Yeah, it's definitely kind of funny once you think of it. I think it's really why they call it the squared circle. But yeah, the apron, words, stuff, things. I can focus. The apron will sometimes refer to the area between the rope and the outside edge of the mat. This is also referred to as quote-unquote the hardest part of the ring. We put that in quotes. It is a fun catchphrase for when someone does a move on that part of it. You can say like, oh no, it's devastating. He hit a pile driver on the hardest part of the ring. Where in reality, it is not really all that much harder or different. It's not, none of it's soft. There's, I think, less than an inch of padding across the entire ring. But it is something that you'll hear, especially in wrestling, when someone does a move there. It is the most devastating side of the ring. The ring apron also is reference to the curtain that hangs over the edge of the ring. When you look at a wrestling ring, you'll see that there's kind of like a curtain that goes around. Usually has some kind of logos of the wrestling company or the show that you're watching. Some of them will have sponsors and things like that. So the ring apron will also refer to the tapestry that is draped over the edge. You'll see that it's often moved out of the way to get under the ring, where you'll find weapons, other equipment, tools, and the like that can also come into play when it comes to a match. When someone yells, "Get the table," they usually lift up the ring apron, pull out the table before putting it in the ring. Probably comes from Greece, where they had a circle for glorious naked combat. Tragic just loves that glorious naked combat. So, excuse me. So I just said that it was a square. It's the squared circle. However, that is not the only shape that we see. Square versus hexagon. Square is the most common shape you will see in wrestling. More or less, the standard wrestling ring is going to be square. It can be sometimes shorter, meaning it can be closer to the ground with not so much clearance to raise up. But the shape is the most well-known when someone says wrestling ring. Now, the other one that you're going to see, and I don't think there's many other shapes, but the six-sided ring is a variant that is always a fun thing to see. It was very popular in Mexico, but it was brought into America when TNA started forming, when Jeff Jarrett left WWE and he wanted to start his own federation, which was TNA. He saw the six-sided ring in Mexico, and he was like, I want to set us apart from everything in America. So he brought the Mexican six-sided ring to America to really set themselves apart, and it was a great success. TNA gained a lot of prominence. I think that's the word. But people could easily recognize that a six-sided ring, they're like, that is different, that is interesting. It changed up a lot of the way a lot of wrestlers had to work in the ring, because now there's different angles. There's more sides to worry about, different kind of like ring awareness. However, it has been replaced in TNA with a regular four-sided ring. It's gone back and forth, I think, twice, where they had the six-sided, then they went square, then they went back six-sided, they went square. When you talk to wrestlers, they said the six-sided ring was a lot harder on their bodies. I have to imagine a lot of it has to do with the way that the underbelly of the rings are. With the square, there's probably ways to make it so it's not so solid, but with a more different shape, it allows less wiggle room, and it's probably a little bit more solid and affects people's bodies a little bit differently. But yeah, so those are the two shapes that you're going to see. The octagon is usually seen for MMA. Six-sided ring kind of reflects that, so sometimes companies like that appeal of it as well. But the standard is the four-sided ring with 3 ropes. When you see 4 ropes, that's traditionally a boxing ring. If it has 2 ropes, it's usually used for dwarf wrestling because they are shorter. Sometimes the rings will be smaller themselves so they can get the 3 ring. But yeah, the standard wrestling ring you're going to see is going to be 3 ropes, 4 corners, or if you're in Mexico, the 6 corners. Now, the next slide is going to say what a wrestling ring's best friend is: a cage. So, as you can see in these photos here, there is a great deal of different types of cages that you can put on a ring. Whenever you think of a cage match in wrestling, there's always a variations of a couple of them. Some good, some not so good. Here, kind of going down the line here, the blue cage that we see here on the top left, featuring, let's see, what is that? That's Ultimate Warrior, and I want to say that's Robert Roode. The classic blue cage is very much what people think of when they think of like 80s wrestling and in cages. It is a very, very strong steel structure where all the bars are kind of like steel bars, look like they might be about a foot by a foot gaps. But after a while, WWE transitioned to these more chain link fences, which is kind of the standard of a lot of cages from here on out. The traditional one has a that we see nowadays is the 4 sides. Some of those look hella dangerous. The bottom row yellow cage, third from the right. Yeah, we'll talk about that one in a hot second. So yeah, the traditional ones nowadays that you'll see will be the 4 sides with the chain link fence and then a frame up top to kind of keep everything sturdy, so that everyone, because after a while they were like, oh, we could probably jump off the cages, so they made it so it was a little bit safer to jump off the top of the cage, such as the second picture here where you see Jeff Hardy jumping off onto Umaga, and that's kind of like the standard. I should also note that almost every cage has a door that you can get in and out of, because one of the stipulations for a cage match is to get out through the door. But that brings us to the next one where you'll see someone standing atop. That is Shane McMahon sitting on top of the Hell in a Cell cage. This is one that we've seen on VCW a number of times. It is not necessarily attached to the ring sides. It is actually a cage that drops over top. It's like a 20-foot tall cage with a top and sides. Wrestlers get on top, wrestlers go through the top, and the like. But again, that is returning back to the chain link style. The last one on the top is the, is the Asylum cage from TNA, I believe. It kind of reflects a little bit of the blue one from the 80s with the very thick bars. This one also having a top, though, while being attached to the sides of the ring. That one had a hole in the top center. I think one of the goals was to try and get out through the top hole. Why have a door when your opponent's body can make the door for you? That's very true. That one was not used very often. I don't think. I remember a few matches. You have a couple of characters in there that I'm trying to recognize, like Curryman. I think Alex Shelley, Super Eric, a couple other people in there. As for the bottom row, we have the Elimination Chamber. This is a somewhat newer idea that they had, where this cage is either I don't know if they still stuck with the chain links. I know when they first started it, it had chains they created a fence out of just straight chains. It also has 4 chambers on the inside. That is a match that usually involves 4 people standing in their chambers, 2 people wrestling, and then they get periodically released and eliminated. It's very much kind of in the same sense as the Hell in a Cell, where people can get on top. Well, at least from the inside, they can't escape this one. It's just, like, oh, these are some deadly cage matches. Cage matches usually used to be like, no one can get in, and the only way to win is to devastate your opponent. Next to the Elimination Chamber, we have War Games. This was originally conceived in WCW, in which you have 2 rings next to each other, surrounded by a cage. This was recently brought back the last couple of years, usually seen on WWE's development show, NXT. It was, I believe, conceived by the late Dusty Rhodes, Cody Rhodes' dad, which is why he wanted to come back to WWE. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, 2 rings next to each other, surrounded by a cage, just for more shenanigans. Now to the yellow cage that Tragic has pointed out. This is this is the Punjabi prison match. This is a cage made of bamboo. We have left the realm of metal for this one. It is surrounded in 3 layers of bamboo cages, or fences, more or less. The goal of that match is to get through each layer of the bamboo fencing and be the first to escape the 3 layers. It was incredibly dangerous. Bamboo does not have a whole lot of give. It can splinter to some degrees. And it was also very hard to see the match inside. So people did not like it. It's happened twice in the history of wrestling, and neither one of them were really good. The last picture we have here on the bottom row, I don't remember what it's called, but it's for the movie Ready to Rumble, starring David Arquette. This was a movie that starred a bunch of WCW wrestlers, David Arquette, and very much in that realm of wrestling's not real, it's still real. How do we prove it? Kind of a thing. And it is 3 cages stacked on top of each other. It is a weird nightmare. I think they did have it on WCW at least once. It is not good. It is incredibly dangerous for the people to even just walk around on it. And, not the best option. Yes, a lot of the questions that we have our executives would have is, how do we level up a cage match? You've seen some matches where they will put barbed wire around the top of a standard cage match, or they'll have the top of it have a bunch of weapons that they can pull down and use. There are so many variations for cage matches to try and just make it more quote unquote deadly. But yeah. So this is why I say the cage is the ring's best friend. It is often used as a way to enhance the ring as well as create kind of a blow off to a feud. So we've talked about the ring, but what about the wrestlers? They're kind of important to this whole thing. So we'll talk about it. Good versus evil is usually the story that we tell when it comes to pro wrestling. Babyface. Babyface, or just faces, they're also known as the Blue Eyes, or, the heroes, or whatnot, are the good guys and gals. This is where you'll usually hear us say face. Again, this is where you hear someone say babyface or face. They're referring to the good guy. Or if they're working more face, they are trying to work more like the good person. They usually don't cheat. They work with the crowd, trying to get them to cheer, say the catchphrases, get them to say it back. This is a quote from Hulk Hogan. They eat their vitamins and say their prayers. I did not spell prayers. Eat their praise. Told you there's going to be some typos. Most glaring example of a babyface is John Cena, seen here. Never give up. they eat pray. But yeah, John Cena has kind of become the epitome of a babyface. Hogan was it for a while in the 80s. Here we also have Bayley in her earlier gimmick where she was a big hugger. Uh, they really changed the the meaning of the cell. It's very true. But a babyface is only as good, or only looks as good, when they have heels. Heels are the bad guys and gals, and they do bad things. They cheat to win. They make the crowd boo them. They're cocky. Depending on the character, they say things like, "My shoes cost more than your house." Here we have MJF and Tony Storm. These are both TNA wrestlers, or not TNA, sorry, AEW wrestlers. They are the ones that are going to work in the match where they're going to try and say things to get the crowd to boo them, whether it's just simple things like "your sports team sucks," or "I'm richer than you, I'm better than you, I'm hotter than you, you're all a bunch of slobs." In a match, they may try and push some of the rules to their limits. Like if they're being told by the referee to let go of a pin, they might a submission. They might hold on to the submission a little bit longer. They're going to try and get a weapon in. They're going to try to do X, Y, Z just to really get the crowd to go, "Look, that's a bad guy." But that not everyone is a good guy or a bad guy. What we have next are tweeners, which in hindsight, it feels very. The word tweener feels weird, but a tweener is a character who is portrayed as being morally neutral or ambiguous. That they are between a face and a heel, sometimes referred to as grays. Another term to describe this kind of character is kind of like an anti-hero or an anti-villain. This is where they might do things that are a little bit more questionable, but they're not necessarily good or bad. So in my VCW persona, a heel, since I mean, you could say that you're a heel, but just because you're a flesh tuber. Or any moments heels have been unscripted, so it's truly surprised people. I know most of these guys. I tried to pick a lot of people that people would recognize. So there are times where heels just do straight up things where they go off script, or they go in what's called they go into work for themselves, where let's see. I'm trying to think of a good example of how they would do that. I mean, whether they actually try to hit their opponent, or they know they're the bad guy and they lose, but they pretend that like nothing ever hurt. There's a couple times where like they're supposed to like take a finisher and then they ignore the finisher, and they're like, "Oh, look, you didn't hurt me. I don't care." It's definitely hard to try to pinpoint one example of, because usually, again, everyone's trying to make each other look good. But yeah, like you said, here we have a bunch of the tweeners. You have a lot of people like Undertaker. You know, he's an evil, undead, like, mortician with magical powers. So he says he's going to like bury you alive and things like that. But he's often very cheered because he is liked. So he's very kind of like that Batman-esque character. You have Rhea Ripley, who's immensely popular right now, often referred to as Mommy. She is the goth mom of TikTok right now. Her character is predominantly heel, but she is very popular, so she kind of fits in that tweener kind of thing. Eddie Guerrero, in the middle, is probably one of the most well-known kind of tweeners. His catchphrase is literally, "I lie, I cheat, I steal," but he was so charismatic, people cheered for him to do these things. So he had very heel tactics, but he was beloved for those tactics. Yes, Rhea is mother. Bray Wyatt, which is probably my favorite wrestler, is kind of seen as a tweener depending on where he is. Whether it's for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, he's very charismatic, and kind of the actions he has are kind of weird. Steve Austin is probably one of the biggest ones out there of all history. Again, he was doing all kinds of really jerk stuff, but he was kind of the redneck, hate boss kind of character, and he told everyone to shut up, and he drank beer. So he was very seen as a tweener, but he leaned more to the face kind of thing. So some of the ones that kind of sit in here, we call them tweeners because they're immensely popular for being what they are. So like Steve Austin is a tweener because he has some weird tactics, but he's beloved. Same thing with Eddie. Yes, indeed, rip Eddie. Or you had people like The Miz, who is really good at being a heel, but we love him for being a heel, so he almost fits into the tweener aspect. So like we said, it's a gray area. A lot of darker or edgy characters kind of fit into tweeners, and I think to some degree that's where a lot of people like to sit, because if you're a face or a heel, I think it can limit you. But these characters, these wrestlers, need styles. And there are a plethora of styles, but I've kind of broken down, I think it's about 5 different styles to kind of give you a generic kind of like idea of what they do. So like first one we're going to talk about is giants. They be tall, they be large. They often use their height, weight, and strength to their advantage, whether that is dropping people from very high, using their large limbs for strikes, or overall just being hard to move. Most giants, at least on the male side, tend to be on the upper end of 6 foot, but often passing 7 foot. Some examples I have here, you have like Andre the Giant, Big Show, not pictured as Kane, or Braun Strowman. You have Yokozuna here and Awesome Kong. Andre the Giant is probably the most well-known giant in all of wrestling. Everyone either knows him from wrestling, fighting Hulk Hogan, or even from like The Princess Bride, where he was a very beloved giant. Close second is probably someone like Big Show, down here. Hello, Big Show, who has been a long staple of wrestling, whether it was in WCW as the Giant or as Big Show in WWE. He was often billed as Andre's son, just because he is also over 7 feet tall, or he is 7 foot. It's one or the other. Yokozuna was a super heavyweight, often portrayed as a sumo wrestler type character, despite the fact that he is Samoan. But that's wrestling. You get a character and you work with it. Omos is a more recent wrestler. He is, I think, 7'4". He's a big boy. He is very large. And Awesome Kong. She was the closest I could really find to like a giant as far as the women's division. I believe she's over 6 foot, and she is on the broad side. And she is often portrayed as this giant powerhouse kind of thing. It would be so good, and I love him in that. Yeah, Andre was quite a character. Andre was a good person. But I said powerhouse, which leads us to the powerhouse. This is the strong people. As the name suggests, these are wrestlers that rely on their power and strength. With powerful strikes and slams, they overwhelm their competitors, making them a feared competitor. I'm talking so much, I need to make sure I'm drinking. This is a lot of when you think of like wrestling. I could have thrown anyone from like Randy Savage. Hogan is another one of those ones, but I don't want to keep putting his face anywhere. Thank you for the hydrate. But yeah, these are the strong boys. Like for here, we have people like Goldberg, which was a favorite of mine growing up. We have Chyna, another big women's division character. I was a big fan of. She, again, a very strong woman. John Cena is considered a powerhouse. He does a lot of the picking up of people, like picking up Big Show and Edge at Mania. More recently, Roman Reigns is a powerhouse. Maybe not to the same degree as like I'm going to bench you a couple of times. Bobby Lashley. These are your strong boys and girls, lads and ladies. These are the strong ones. These are kind of like when you think of a pro wrestler, you kind of think of these bigger characters. But what if they're not giant? Well, there's the option to be a striker or a brawler. These are the wrestlers who tend to focus on using their hits to do the work for them. Strikers tend to have either martial arts training, seeing combos of kicks and strikes to take down their opponent, or they're brawlers who are just here for a good fight, throwing haymakers, ground and pound, and more. They can be less precise, but just as deadly. Here we have a mixed bag of strikers and brawlers. We have Shayna Baszler, who has a background in like UFC, along with like Ronda Rousey. We have Malachi Black, formerly known as Aleister Black, who is a martial artist. He's Dutch martial artist. Another couple of martial artists you have is like Asuka in the bottom center, as well as Shinsuke Nakamura. I see my boot yet. You do love your Asuka. Some brawlers that you'll see are people like Mick Foley, or the many phases of Foley's. You have Mankind, Dude Love, Cactus Jack. They were, oh God, she's just gonna do the poison mist at you, tragic. That's what you mean by spit on me. So Foley was a great brawler, and John Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose, He's always been very much a brawler. He's got a background in kind of the extreme wrestling, the deathmatch scene, and the stuff like that. So there's just a lot of just kind of like brawling, getting him down, try to choke him out, and stuff like that. But another option that kind of has a lot of crossover is indeed technical wrestlers. These athletes are the master of submissions with counters for any situation. Here you can see some with a background in traditional wrestling utilize those skills to gain the upper hand. So this is, I know what she does. So this is where Tragic has mentioned the Greco-Roman naked wrestling stuff. This is where some of it kind of comes into play here. People who have a background in traditional wrestling that want it to reflect usually end up in the technical kind of category. There's a lot of crossover between technical and strikers. Some examples that we have here is the Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle is probably one of the most famous ones. William Regal. We have Gail Kim, Io Sky, Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson, depending on how you know him, and Bret Hart. A lot of these guys are really well known for their submissions. Kurt Angle's ankle lock. You have like William Regal's Regal lock. Daniel Bryan had the Yes lock. I forgot, what was it? It also has another name. Bret Hart, most famous for his sharpshooter. Io Sky and Gail Kim with their own respective ones. I'm blanking on what they had. But this is where the people like their primary way of winning a match is to tap out their opponent. But lastly, there's another category. It's probably one of my favorites. Is the high flyers. Hey, look, there's people here. The sky's the limit for these wrestlers. Daredevils at heart. Lots of speed and aerial attacks are their weapons of choice, often taking a risk and putting their bodies on the line for the win and your entertainment. AKA flips for days. Here we have a plethora of people. There's more than I had planned on, but this is what happens. One of the most famous high flyers in the world of all time is Rey Mysterio. He brought a lot of that lucha libre type stuff to America, respecting it with the mask and really sticking to the flips and high dives. Pac is a UK one who does his finisher involves jumping off the top rope and flipping multiple times. Snake on his arm. Did I miss something? Snake. What are you talking about, Trey? Why does the guy on the top right have a snake on his arm? You're talking about Jeff Hardy's armband. I was like, oh, I guess I could have done a whole nother one here. I didn't think about it. The guy, no, he's not the guy that does the snake move. That would be Santino Marella. He does the Cobra, which I was like, man, I'm kicking myself. I should have added the comedic wrestlers. But no, that's Jeff Hardy, who is also known for being very much a daredevil, doing a lot of like big dives and whatnot. Oh, add. I'm gonna take some time to sip. CurseYouHomes.com. Tragic guy. The Ohio ad again. That's funny. Why is that skateboard cut out so badly? Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Excuse me. But yeah, so you have Jeff being very much the daredevil. Bottom row, we have Darby Allin, which is a more young up-and-comer, known for being real daredevil, doing all kind, like, he makes Jackass look like play school. I have Lita here for being a little bit daredevil and some high-flying action. Ray Phoenix is another one. What the fuck was the Levi's commercial? I don't know what Levi's commercial we're talking about. So yeah, we have Lita. Ray Phoenix is another one of those ones. He's part of the Lucha Bros. A lot of fame for being in a lot of Mexican federations as well as Lucha Libre style of stuff. He is on another level as far as the flips and stuff go. It is crazy. And then we have Kofi Kingston on the far right. He is also known as kind of a high flyer. He does a lot of like just a lot of energy. He's very fast. Again, strikes kind of playing into his role here. But that kind of does lead me into this. No one has one style. Almost every wrestler is a combo of multiple styles: striker and technical, giant and powerhouse, high flying and brawler. The sky's the limit in the styles. Is the limit in styles and combos, keeping your moveset fresh while honing their skills to become a master of the preferred skill. So by that I mean, I guess it's not very ambiguous. It's kind of true. Like, you have plenty of people who are very technical and they love their submissions, but they have like a martial arts background. You have people who are very big who are also very strong and do the same kind of thing. High flyers usually kind of have a bunch of strike combinations as well because they're on the smaller side, so they want to do a lot of quick attacks and then jump off something. So once you kind of have like your style, the question is like, well, what do you go from there? You're like, oh, I want to be a high flyer, but what should I do from there? And that kind of brings us to the next thing. Oh no, I guess we didn't. I lied. There's a whole nother card. Don't pay attention to me. So wrestling styles also vary quite a bit. Like, you can have a couple of different styles, but where you're from also kind of plays a role. Wrestling is different in every country. The sport is beloved for different reasons in different places, and that is reflected in their styles. The quote-unquote wrestling genius Chris Hero describes them as this: Japan is struggle through sport. Mexico is marriage of pageantry and acrobatics. British and European is physical and mental chess. So that kind of gives you kind of an idea. So like in Japan, it's storytelling through a struggle. A lot of back and forth, trying to overcome each other, and it being very difficult, and you're trying to get that one up. Mexico very much loves characters, as well as they love doing a lot of the high flying. If you look it up, they'll say like, oh, Lucha Libre utilizes their smaller frames, but they're still like 300-pound dudes doing multiple flips into the ring. This is, again, very much reflected in a lot of Lucha Libre. British is also very, in a lot of ways, similar to Japan. They're very physical. There's strong style, which involves a lot of very stiff shots where you're hitting your opponents pretty hard to kind of really emphasize the reality of it, leaving opponents black and blue or red. But it's very more technical there. So wherever you try to learn stuff, like, or at least originally, or when you're going to a different company, you may go to a different country to try and learn and widen your palette. We're trying to learn new things and try to get better and hone your skills. But so yeah, that's where, okay, you know what kind of wrestling style you want to do. You kind of figure out like, okay, this works for me, but what's my character? Well, that brings us to gimmicks. So finally on this topic, we talk gimmicks. A gimmick refers to a wrestler's in-ring persona, character, behavior, attire, or other distinguishing trait while performing to draw fan interest. Are you an undead wizard, a MMA fighter, a cult leader, a Mountie, a tiger anime character? Are you a model, a pirate, an ant? The possibilities are quite literally endless. Gimmicks can be changed like seasons, either to keep things fresh or to drop something and try and find something that works. Gimmicks are hard, especially in the modern day. When we're talking about like the 80s, everyone had a very, what about a gamer? So what are you, Xavier Woods? Like, that's his whole thing. But yeah, your character, like what your character is, can be kind of challenging nowadays. When you're talking about like the 80s, these were characters like, I'm a trash man, I'm a repo man, I'm a giant, I'm a crazy man. You know, they can be very simple, and then people were asking for more complicated things. A lot of Lucha Libre, the gimmicks are animals. Like, that's what it. I wish I was him. Don't we all? Some examples we have here is that we have Kairi Sane, who for a long time had a pirate gimmick. We have Bray Wyatt's Fiend, where he's like a demon. Ken Shamrock was an MMA fighter inside the ring and out. Undertaker, kind of an undead wizard. The Mountie was a Mountie. Not that complicated. We have the Colony here, where they are ants. And we have Tiger Mask, who was Canadian Mountie. Yes, he was a Canadian Mountie. That was his whole character. And he also feuded with Big Boss Man, who was a regular American police officer. Beautiful. Um, yeah, I love the Colony. I think Fire Ant is now currently Orange Cassidy in AEW. And this is where also gimmicks: are you a serious character? Are you a funny character? Comedic wrestling has seen such a boom, especially on the indies, and it's now starting to get more in. This is where you see people like Orange Cassidy, or like Tragic mentioned, the Snake Hand. You have Santino Morella with the Cobra attack. Um, the Ants were part of a company that's now no longer running, called Chikara, where everything was ridiculous. They had truckers, they had ants, they had Ice Cream Man, and I don't mean like, oh, I drive an ice cream truck. I mean like a literal guy made of ice cream. You had Player Uno and Player Dos, who were like video game characters, and they played up things like invisible grenades, or using the Force, or hitting the pause button on someone's trunks so they stopped moving. Tiger Mask, there's been at least 4 Tiger Masks, not to mention Black Tiger Mask, which are all based off of the anime Tiger Mask. Um, I'm blanking on which one came first. I want to say the anime was first, and they found wrestlers to match the anime, and then that got immensely popular, so they kept having people do the character. Gimmicks can be serious, gimmicks can be funny, gimmicks can be a back and forth between the two. Uh, Gimmicks, or a lot of it is just finding what connects to the audience. A lot of times, the audience has to believe in what you're doing. If they think you are faking it or trying, or not trying, they won't believe it. But you have a lot of people where, even if it's a silly gimmick, they make it work because they put their whole heart into it, and the audience is like, we saw that a lot with Stardust, which was a gimmick that was given to Cody Rhodes, of this bizarre like space rip off of his brother Goldust. And he was just crazy. He hated the character so much. It would have been doomed to fail, but he tried very hard at it, and the audience fell in love with it, and he made it work. And then he was like, I'm done with it. Get out of here." But yeah, so gimmicks are I mean, it's a lot like VTubing in a lot of ways. What is your VTuber? It's like, well, I'm a Viking clown. Cool. That's my gimmick. And that makes it real simple. I'm a princess unicorn. Cool. Make that work. So gimmicks and VTubers or OCs have a lot in common. This is very much like, this is a lot, to some degree, your gimmick is your VTube persona in wrestling. And so there's a lot of crossover there. So we've seen the ring, we've seen the wrestlers, and they know what they can kind of do, but how do they win a match? And it sounds simple, but there's a couple of things. Winning and losing. Winning. The 3 easiest ways to win is to pin your opponent for a 3 count. Both shoulders need to be touching the mat, and they need to be held down, and the ref counts to 3. This is where you see a lot of things where it's a close 3 count or near fall, and they're trying to pin their opponent. The pinning usually happens after a finisher move is done and your opponent is knocked out. So that way you don't have to worry about it. Sometimes you'll try to squeeze one in and hold them down for the 3 count. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's why the referee looks at the shoulders. The other most common way is going to be making your opponent tap, submit, or pass out in a submission. A lot of people have their finishers are submissions. So it's usually applying pressure on a part of a body, whether it's stretching it or pressure or twisting. And your opponent goes, I don't want to do this anymore. And they tap either the ground, which is the most common way you'll see in WWE, or they tap the opponent applying it to say, let go of me, please. Sometimes you'll see it where they don't tap out, they in fact pass out. This is usually referred for a lot of like choking type things, where if someone's in a guillotine choke, they might just pass out versus tap. You'll see it used in some cases where it has nothing to do with like cutting off the oxygen. The opponent will pass out from pain. That way they don't have to tap. But yeah, submission is the second most common way you're going to see a match won. The third most common is going to be a ref stoppage because you've knocked out your opponent. This is also kind of like blends in a little bit with the pass out. the ref is saying no more. They either can't continue, they're unconscious, or something very similar. Losing a match. I wonder how that happens. I don't know. You get pinned, submitted, or knocked out. Very easy. Losing can also happen by getting disqualified. If you are caught using a weapon, caught cheating by putting your foot on the rope, or getting your partner to come in to help you when they shouldn't be. If you're not listening to the ref's rules, like he was telling you to let go, and you're not. Or if you put your hands on the ref and you're caught. Like if you bump into them, you might not get disqualified, but you might get warned. But if you just go like, hey, ref, and you punch him in the face, you're going to get disqualified. And not getting back in into the ring before the 10 count. We'll also bring it up here in the draw. The most common draw you're going to see is a double count out when both wrestlers don't get back in the ring before the 10 count. Double pins and double knockouts can happen if both parties don't stand up by the 10 count. So you'll see the 10 count is kind of like the standard for kind of like the lengthy things. A count out begins when you get out of the ring. If one wrestler gets out of the ring, the referee will start a 10 count. If the second wrestler gets out, they have until the end of that 10 count to get back into the ring. So you can lose if you're outside the ring by the end of the 10 count. If you're both out, it's a draw. You both lose, kind of. Nobody really wins. I know what I forgot to put here. But yeah, you'll see sometimes where two people get pinned just because of the way that they collide or they're laying on top of each other. Everyone's shoulders are on the mat, so they're counted as a double pin, so it's a draw. Double knockouts will happen if they collide and nobody gets up. You'll see the referee start doing a 10 count in the ring to see if both parties can get to their feet before the end of the 10 count. Winning and losing is kind of weird when it comes to championship matches, unless otherwise specified. If you are the champion, you have to win usually by pinning or submitting your opponent. I mean, let me rephrase that. If you are not the champion, the only way to win the championship in a standard match is to pin or submit your opponent. If you are counted out or they are counted out, you do not win the championship. If somebody gets disqualified, let's say that the champion gets disqualified, you win, but you don't win the championship. You have to either pin or submit your champion to get that championship. It's a little weird. So yeah, you could technically be the champion and lose via disqualification or the count out and still retain your championship, even though it's a championship match. It's a little weird. I feel like champions have stayed champs through scummy means. 120,000 billion %. You see it very often where they're in like this like intense blood feud, and they're like, "All right, we're going to get ready to win this match, and you're much larger than me, and you're really angry because I showed up at your house and beat up your dad. But go on, I dare you to come at me," and you poke your opponent in the eye, and then you get disqualified for cheating, and you're like, "Oh no, I lost. But I got my championship still, ha ha." And that's usually where they're like, okay, no disqualification championship match, or restart this match with no disqualification. The DQ thing is the big thing on a lot of things. So, okay, I got a little ahead of myself. Disqualified. A ref can call a match for a number of reasons, and getting disqualified is one of them. Putting your hands on the ref can cause an instant DQ, so if you grab them and shove them, the ref is like, that's it, you're disqualified. If your opponent is in a hold and they grab the ropes, or if you're attacking someone in the corner of the ring, or if you're choking them, like just like straight up strangling them, not like doing a submission, or you're pulling their hair, the referee will give you a 4 count to let go, or you're disqualified. Getting caught using a weapon, disqualified. Weirdly, shoes are kind of a gray area. I don't know why. Like, if you take off your boot and you hit someone with it, it's not a disqualification most of the times. It's weird. I couldn't tell you why. If someone else attacks your opponent, if someone else attacks your opponent, you're disqualified. This has been used backwards for story that I just gave the example for, where you disqualified yourself and you keep your championship. Or if you're trying to fight someone who's like, all right, if you win this match, you get a title shot. So then you attack your friend, so that the person that was trying to get the match won gets disqualified, and they don't win the match. So disqualified it usually leads to a lot of kind of shitty and shady and not great things, like you said, scummy means. It's definitely used as a plot device more than anything else. Countouts: when a wrestler leaves the ring, the referee will begin a 10 count. If the other also leaves, the count continues. A count will restart if one wrestler enters the ring and gets back out, thus lengthening the time outside the ring. So that way they can keep doing things like, oh, we're going to fight where there's less padding, or I'm going to get you near the things like this. Most of the environment around the stairs, or around the ring, stairs, the announcer table, the ring posts, are fair game and don't cause a DQ. If you grab the ring bell, that's a DQ. If you grab your championship belt to use, that's a DQ. But you throw them into the stairs that are on the outside, totally cool. Slam their head into the pole, totally cool. Throw them through the announcer table, totally cool. But if you pull out a table, then put them through that table, that's a disqualification. If there is a no disqualification stipulation, there's also no countout. As far as I know. Because I guess countout only counts as like a subdivision of disqualification. But the general rule of thumb is, if you go, this is a no disqualification match, the count-out's not going to be in effect. So we'll kind of go through some of the more common types of matches. A lot of these rules that I've just gone over are standard wrestling matches. And especially with the VCW, we don't like normal matches. We like adding a little bit of spice to a lot of things. So here are your basic ones. Singles match. It's basic one-on-one, all the rules apply. Submission match, the only way to win your match is to make your opponent tap. No disqualification. Look at that. It's also known as extreme rules or no holds barred. There's some kind of difference between like no DQ extreme rules and no holds barred. It's kind of a weird line. It all just means you can't be disqualified. That's what it really means. Last man standing. You have to get your opponent to lay down for a 10 count. Usually that means you've knocked them out and they can't get back to their feet before the referee counts 10. Again, that 10 count can happen usually in or out of the ring. An I quit match means that you fight your opponent and try to make them say I quit throughout the match. Usually through a microphone. Like you beat them up and you're like, all right, here's a microphone in your face, say it. And they're like, no. And you're like, all right, I guess I'll beat you up some more. Cage match. Most cage matches have the stipulation you can either pin, submit, or escape through the cage. Also no disqualification. I've also noted that last man standing, I quit matches, and cage matches have no disqualification. Tag team match. Two teams have to tag each other in to switch spots in the match. And if it's a tornado tag match, there is no tagging. So it's just not a tag match. Tag matches can usually go up in number. This is where you'll see like 3-on-3 for trio tags. You have variants like the Survivor Series match, which is usually two teams, anywhere between 4 to 6 people on each team that are eliminated one by one through pin or submission. Ladder matches is to get the thing that is hanging above the ring, usually a championship match, a briefcase with a title shot or some other contract in it. Sometimes it's just a bag of money, things like that. I've noticed I've forgotten one of them. One of the matches that you can also do is a falls count anywhere match, meaning you can pin your opponent anywhere, outside the ring, backstage, anything. The referee will follow you around. Triple threat or fatal 4. This is a free-for-all match consisting of 3 to 4 opponents, respectively. For some reason, there's also no disqualification. So if you're in a triple threat match, just grab a chair and hit everyone. It's easy. There are dozens of other types of matches, such as like battle royales, also known as like the Royal Rumble, ambulance matches, buried alive and casket matches, first blood, shark cage match, and there are many, many more. They always just find a stipulation for something. You have like ladder matches, chair matches, stair matches, where the only legal thing are those weapons. You have like kendo sticks. You have things on a pole matches. They literally just like try to find more and more things to go, how can we make this match weird? Some of them are just like themed badly. They're like, oh, here's the Nigerian drum match, and we surrounded the ring with drums that you can use to fight each other. or the Symphony of Destruction, where you can use the instruments as weapons. They're just no DQ matches with set dressing. You see them a lot during holidays as well, where like the ring is surrounded with holiday. There's like, oh look, here's a jack-o'-lantern I'm going to hit you with, or oh, here's a Christmas tree. What's in this gift box? It's a kendo stick. But yeah, those are the most common matches you'll see. Oh, okay. All right, so the screen is black for a reason. We're going to talk about, try and get through this somewhat quickly, is the dark side of pro wrestling. We're having a good time. A lot of talking, a lot of joking, a lot of fun stuff. But wrestling has a history of not so great things. Some of this is going to talk about injury, drug use, bullying, and a few other things. This is not fun. I just want to give you guys some time to prep. Or mentally prepare yourself. That I don't go into too much detail. I try not to. But it's something that we have to kind of know when it comes to pro wrestling. We're in a much better place nowadays, but especially in the past, it was not as pleasant. So wrestling has come a long way, and backstage is a great example. Sadly, wrestling has not always reflected the positive entertainment industry that we know and love today. For many years, companies have created and they've also utilized a toxic culture focused on macho kind of mentality, misogynistic actions, and in some cases, straight up criminal views and actions, like straight up crimes. The most recent case against the most well-known face of WWE, Vince McMahon, is bringing a light to a portion of it. So if you've seen Vince McMahon in the news at all recently, you know kind of the stuff that is being said that he has done, and it's not pretty. And to be straight honest, it's disgusting, it's criminal, and is unacceptable in any way, shape, or form. The wrestling is in a much better place nowadays. We still have plenty of things like bullying, mistreatment or over-sexualization of women, homophobia and transphobia, backstage politics being used to abuse the system, greed and monopolies. Again, WWE is the result of it trying to become a monopoly of the wrestling in the first place. Screw jobs, in which things are done off script in order to screw people out of their contracts or in front of an audience, or in general, just shitty behavior. It is something that there are so many examples of things, whether they're small slights. There's also been tons of examples of things I meant to put in there. Racism is another, unfortunately, a huge thing in wrestling. Especially with the amount of champions and people who are pushed and used as kind of like the glowing examples of like, look, this is wrestling being predominantly white. This is why you'll see I tried to add a mix of both men, women, and races as examples for wrestlers here. Because, well, again, luckily we're in a much better place today, but it has not always been as good as it's been now. Injuries. This is something that Neon asked when I put out questions for things. Neon asked, what is the worst injury? Injuries when it comes to wrestling can be very real. It is true that when you see, we will see some injuries faked for a storyline or a way to get someone off TV for a bit, whether it's something positive like a wedding, or to take some time off for a different injury. Like, oh no, we injured his arm, but he's actually getting knee surgery, kind of a thing. No injury, no matter how small, is a laughing matter, though. Wrestlings destroy their bodies doing this. Many require surgeries, and many can be life-changing. It was asked, what is the worst injury in the ring? And that list is long and horrifying, but here is a small snippet. Concussions. Concussions are aplenty. For many, many years, we didn't take concussions very seriously, and unfortunately we saw that take a lot of toll on a lot of wrestlers' brains. With the unprotected chair shots that were very popular in the 90s, being something that's become very much more serious, which is why a lot of that kind of stuff is not allowed. Torn muscles, MCLs, ACLs, and the like. You hear all the time about someone tearing a muscle off the bone, their quads, their pecs, and the like. People tearing their ACLs, their MCLs, all kinds of things. Broken shoulders, broken eye sockets, stuff like that for broken bones. Broken necks with paralyzation. that does happen. You do your best to protect your neck in wrestling, but unfortunately things happen. The most recent example is part of the New Day is Big E, and he is out and may never wrestle again due to a broken neck he had. Luckily, he was not paralyzed. Stone Cold Steve Austin was almost paralyzed for a while. There are wrestlers who don't have use of their legs or shoulders down in some cases due to broken necks. You have some people that almost bleed out. Blood used to be extremely popular back in the day. We see it sparingly now used sometimes for story reasons, but it's usually down to safety. People used to do things like take aspirin, and then when they would juice, referring to kind of cut themselves to release blood, that would they sometimes it'd cut too deep and they'd almost bleed out. You had some wrestlers who literally tried to kill each other. It's not pretty. But as far as like the worst injury in the ring we've had is death. There's no way around that. You have death from heart attacks in the ring, but as far as like injury, there's people who have broken their neck and have died. And then you have people, probably the most famous death in wrestling is Owen Hart, who fell to their death. I won't go too far into this. It's if you're asking what the worst injury in wrestling is, it's unfortunately death, but some of it is just it varies across, whether it's like, oh no, I bruised my shoulder, or I broke a bone, or I am irreparably damaged from this. Injuries in the ring, but injuries in the ring or the abuse wrestlers put their body through has consequences outside the ring. From drug abuse, from pain, steroids, and alcohol, concussions, eventual people to improper conditions. This is a continued saga of tragedy. Again, I won't go too far in to keep this on a more upbeat presentation, but it should be noted, especially in the early boom of its popularity, the effects of this performance has on people who do it. The list does go on and on. It is very sad. Again, nowadays we're kind of back on track with people are taking their health more seriously. Things like steroids have been kind of like pushed out of it. People are drug tested regularly. Companies are taking it very seriously, especially after multiple court cases. And it's a shame that it takes court cases to try and protect people. Again, there are storied tragedies that are in things where people are even erased from wrestling history because of their actions. It is extremely tragic. But I did want to answer the question as honestly as possible. But in order to keep this a more positive note, we'll leave the dark side here. If you ever like to learn more, please let me know. If there's anything that you're really going like, I heard about this, is this true? Things like that. Or if you're like, I'd like to learn more about that kind of stuff. Or is there any like success stories after the fact? By all means, I will gladly help with any kind of information. But now we return to more fun instruction with other jobs in wrestling. Ads. It's like every 30 minutes. Oh, well. Get that ad revenue, and it's Cleveland every time. We'll give it a second. Stupid Cleveland. For vacations and homes I can't afford. Oh, goodness gracious. Isn't that what we have, vacations and homes that we will never get? Okay, now I'm back. Yeah, sorry for the dark side. I wanted to just touch on it a little bit because it is part of the basic thing, and it is unfortunately part of our history. Again, Neon asked about injuries, and I wanted to be as honest as possible. I didn't want to make a joke like, oh, you know, that one time Sid Vicious dropped and broke his leg, ah ha ha, silly guy, or Kevin Nash tearing his quad because he walked 2 steps, but yes. So let's return more to a positive note with other jobs in wrestling. Lots of the jobs. There are many jobs you can have, both in and out of the ring. Referees do ref things, and they are the zebras. They are the referee. It also gives the air of it being an actual sport. Referees don't tend to be very prominently characters. They have become a little bit more well known depending on who the wrestler is, or they're respected in their thing. But referees are also people that give directions to wrestlers. They usually have an earpiece in. And they give information from back office to the wrestler, like, hey, time's up, or hey, we're going to do a commercial break, and stuff like that. They're the ones that are usually told that count every pinfall like it's real. A lot of times the referees don't know the full outcome, but they'll also give information like if someone is hurt or if something is wrong. But yeah, referees, you can see them by their stripes. Here we have, let's see, is it Eric Robinson and Audrey, I forget her name, but it's WWE and AEW respectively. We are seeing a boom of female referees, which is wonderful. For a long time, there weren't a whole lot, but now they are gaining a lot of popularity and even becoming well known. Moving on to managers or valets, it's a performer, usually in a non-wrestling role, who is paired with a wrestler in order to help them get over, often acting as a mouthpiece or interfering in matches on their behalf. So, unfortunately, this is where we see managers are often seen as the person who is trying. In this case, we have like Brock Lesnar in the top corner with Paul Heyman, which is probably recognized as one of the best managers of all time, acting as the mouthpiece so the person, so the wrestler doesn't have to talk. Usually, getting them, getting the crowd to react by saying the right things, like this is my beast. They're going to run through everything. Valet feels like an old, outdated term because valet was typically a how do I put this? A attractive female character who went to the ring, had little influence. It was usually like, oh, this when you think of like Miss Elizabeth with Macho Man Randy Savage, Sable with a number of people, whether it was Scott Steiner or Test. Which is why I mention it, but I put them in the same category as manager because it has evolved quite a bit. Yeah, this is where they're usually not a wrestler, or they used to be a wrestler, or they have minimal wrestling experience, or again, they're usually seen as the mouthpiece to do a lot of the talking. You also see them as part of groups, like, oh, here's our tag team, and then they have a manager who's seen as their third at all times. But a lot of times you'll see their manager like goes to the general manager and tries to get them the matches and things like that. Ring announcer. This is the person that introduces the competitors and information to the audience. The Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy is a ring announcer. He was featured predominantly in boxing. He was also featured in wrestling a few times. They have ranged everything, both men and women. Here we have, oh man, how did I forget her name? Yes, you're seeing this. What is her name? It's going to drive me nuts. Not Mike Rowe. Lilia Garcia came back. Why is this? Samantha Ehrman. That's right. She is gaining a lot of popularity right now. She is doing a wonderful job at it right now. But yeah, they're the one that introduced competitors. Like, coming to the ring now is so-and-so from somewhere. They're the ones that tell you, like, the following contest is scheduled for one fall, meaning one pin. They do the Royal Rumble. They explain the rules. They say welcome to the show. They say goodbye during the commercial breaks. So they might talk to the audience a bit. Commentators. They are the ones that sit at the table and talk about the match for everyone at home. This is kind of like what we do with VCW, whether it's me and Tragic, me and Star, me and Eris, me with anyone. We sit and talk about the match that's going on. The commentators or the broadcast team are, let's see, often sitting ringside. The team calls the match for the viewers at home. There's usually consists of two people. Sometimes they have a three team, sometimes there's more. But to boil it down to its most simplest thing is you have two commentators, a color commentator and a play-by-play. In this case, we have good old JR Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler. The play-by-play commentator tells the match about how it is by naming the moves, talking about it like it's a sports event, like suplex here. I was like, oh, he's going for a pin. locking in that label lock. That was the Daniel Bryan move that I forgot earlier. The color commentator is the one that's often making jokes and poking fun and doesn't really talk about too much about the match and more about uh, just being generally more entertaining on that side. The color commentator tends to be aligned more with the heel side of characters, whereas the play-by-play may be like, it's like, oh, that's a dastardly move. It's like, how dare he do that? The color commentator might respond with something like, look, he's got to win, and you win by any means necessary. I like it, kind of a thing. Let's see what's next. The booker, the person in charge of setting up matches and writing angles. This is the person that, when they're like, okay, what do we want the story to be told for these characters? Let's set it up. Let's put it, where do we put it in the show? Who's going to win this match? How do we continue the story? The booker changes, and nowadays you have, like with WWE, the head of creative. The booker would be Triple H. He is in charge of all of that fun stuff. But they work with the producers. Producers are management employees who help wrestlers set up matches and relay instructions from the bookers. So the booker may be like, hey, we want this storyline, and we want this person to go over. So the producer would then go to the wrestlers and go, all right, guys, this is what the booker has decided. How do we want this match to go? What are some spots that we want to do? Here's my ideas. What do you guys have? They're the ones that when the match happens, the booker watches and they go, okay, that was good, or okay, I need to fire the producer for okaying this. And another one that kind of keeps small is the timekeeper. They're the one that rings the bell. Matches will sometimes have times that they have to be in. Like if it's a match has a 20-minute time limit, they're supposed to keep that time. But they often sit ringside and they ring the bell. Everyone's favorite sound is the opening and closing. It's also how wrestlers get a hold of the bell. It's because the guy or gal sits ringside and they have a little hammer and they ring the bell. Yeah. There are plenty of times where people who used to be wrestlers become these characters, or these employees become other characters. We've seen wrestlers who've turned into general managers. We've seen wrestlers become bookers. We've seen bookers become producers. We've seen producers become bookers. A lot of times, producers or old wrestlers. They were yes, ding, ding, ding. Producers often are wrestlers because they used to know how wrestling works, so they know how to talk to wrestlers and do the like. Yeah, so there's tons of other ones, everything from medical to catering to makeup and hair to costume design to costume manufacturing. What's the one? What's the word I was looking for? The people in charge of cameras, the people in charge of TV, the editors and stuff like that. There's tons and tons of jobs. Here's just like people that you might see. You'll see referees in the matches. You'll see the broadcast team. You might see the timekeeper. You might see the announcer. Backstage, you'll have like producers and the people watching and monitoring the show, and managers you'll see in the ring as well. All right, so that's kind of a lot of the rundown. But I said I didn't talk too much about history, so. The ones that I have, it's kind of like the eras of WWE. Now, WWE is not the end-all be-all of all wrestling. It's very clear. However, WWE is the most prominent for a lot of people, and so I kind of touch on the different eras that people might know WWE for. And you'll recognize a lot of things. So, like the golden era of wrestling, it was about 1982 to about 1993, with prominent figures like Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, Andre the Giant, Ultimate Warrior, Sergeant Slaughter, Ric Flair, just to name a few. This is kind of like with like that when Wrestle May-nia became a thing, Cyndi Lauper, and they were like trying to cross over between just wrestling on TV or in like the live shows to like cross over to become kind of like this entertainment dynasty that they were starting. Again, this is kind of that 80s to early 90s kind of era of things where people are like, oh, what is this thing? Very over the top, very exaggerated. This is the some ridiculous characters in speedos fighting each other, baby oil and steroids. The new generation, about 1993 to about 1997. This is where you're going to see the rise of younger stars that kind of break out of that era of like the super muscular character, so you get a little bit of some wavering in here. This is where you see the prominence of people like Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Razor Ramon, Diesel, Lex Luger, Yokozuna, Mankind, Goldust, Owen Hart. Again, so wrestling is kind of changing. They're getting a little bit more things. The birth of the ladder match kind of like comes into this area here with popularity. The style is changing with some more technical stuff and more showboating, things like that. Earl Hebner here, that Gorilla Monsoon, Shawn Michaels, and Bret Hart. About 97 to 2002. This is where most people know wrestling. You talk to just about anyone nowadays, and I talk about wrestling, they go, "Oh, I used to watch wrestling." Well, it was probably due to the Attitude Era or the Monday Night Wars. This is where most people say, "I used to watch wrestling." This is the boom of Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Mick Foley with his characters, Triple H, Kane, Kurt Angle, D-Generation X, The Big Show. This is that era where it was probably at the peak of popularity to be a wrestling fan. Yep, that's when my friend and I would watch. The Rock himself was my man. See, that's what I'm talking about. This is the era with like the most popular belts, some of the most popular characters, and the like. And this was the time where they were guilty. See? And there's nothing wrong with that. This is unfortunately this is where people say like by the end of the Attitude Era they stopped watching. After the Attitude Era, you did see kind of a drop where people started going back to saying things like wrestling is, I hate to say it, but this is the argument people were saying: wrestling is gay, wrestling is stupid, it's a soap opera for men, it's just a bunch of naked guys hugging each other. So after the Attitude Era, that's where it kind of took a hit there. But yeah, this was the biggest era of wrestling. Even like we may be making billions and billions of dollars now, but as far as like mainstream popularity, the Attitude Era and the time when WWE was facing WCW and then eventually buying them and having the Monday Night Wars, that was the biggest thing. Again, all the years are kind of at averages. There's always an argument of when it starts and when it ends. But that brings us to the Ruthless Aggression Era. It was about 2002 to about 2008. This is probably where I started watching it the most. The Attitude Era was probably where I started getting into it. But the Ruthless Aggression, because I was in high school definitely at this time. But this is where we saw the likes of Triple H. John Cena debuted during this. He's actually coined with the phrase Ruthless Aggression. Actually, in the photo we see here is John Cena in his first match against Kurt Angle, answering Kurt Angle's open challenge. And he goes, "What do you have that makes you think that you can step toe-to-toe with Kurt Angle?" And John Cena responds with, "Ruthless Aggression," and then punches him. But yeah, you saw the debut of John Cena, The Undertaker. He looks so small compared to Cena now. Yeah, he was the little boy. The Rock continues. Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels continues. Batista, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar. This is the first run of Brock Lesnar where he spiked in popularity. Goldberg when he came to WWE. But yeah, this was a different type of boom. Again, you see a lot of people here that go on to be continuing, like again, John Cena, Randy Orton, Lesnar. These are people that have like from this point are now holding the company like on their backs. Some names you'll see that continue to repeat, like Triple H. The Undertaker doesn't go away in many of these eras. He is predominantly on these lists as people of note because never leaves, and he's still just as good. But yeah, so that brings us to the PG era. We call it the PG era because with wrestling becoming still fairly popular, but still wanting to reach as wide of an audience, they decided to make their product PG, which means it was time to get rid of blood. It was time to get rid of swearing. It was time to get rid of a lot of like sex and sexy characters and things like that. So that takes us from about 2008 to about 2011. I mean, I think we're now just starting away from the quote-unquote PG rating on things, but the era here, you have like John Cena carrying the company on his back, Batista, Randy Orton, Edge, Triple H, Jeff Hardy, CM Punk kind of debuts. Christian, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, The Rock. Again, you'll see some of these names continue to repeat. It's usually a lot of the great characters. For example, the match that we have here is Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at Wrestle May-nia. This is by far one of my favorite matches. It is during the PG era, but it is just wonderful storytelling between some great legends. I could have thrown a picture of John Cena here, but I felt this one worked just fine. Let's see. Which is now brings us to the reality era. We call it the reality era because this is starting when we start blurring more and more of the lines of what is real, what is not. People are getting a good look at stuff behind the scenes. So from about 2011 to 2016, you're seeing the rise of characters like Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson. CM Punk has really boomed here. Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns when they're the Shield. Four Horsewomen. Sorry, that's Four Horsewomen is Becky Lynch, Bayley, Sasha Banks, and Charlotte Flair. But yeah, CM Punk definitely was very popular here. He is known for blurring the lines with he has a promo called The Pipe Bomb, where he really blurs the line between what is real and what is storyline here. But yeah, so that's the reality era, which then brings us to the new era. I don't know why it's called the new era. It's not exactly new because we've already moved past it. From about 2016 and 2019, you had people like Roman Reigns rising to the top, Ronda Rousey joined WWE, AJ Styles, Brock Lesnar returning, John Cena still doing his thing, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Daniel Bryan, Finn Balor, Kevin Owens, the Four Horsewomen, the New Day, Bray Wyatt, and the rest of the Wyatt family. The new era contains, you'll see that the picture here is Stephanie McMahon with Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch. During the new era, quote unquote, we saw a huge boom in women's wrestling. With the end, as we got into the PG era, then the reality era, there was a huge focus on trying to make sure that women's wrestling was taken seriously. There was plenty of people that were moving away from just being arm candy or women that, quote unquote, couldn't wrestle. They really started focusing on creating solid characters with good wrestling and trying to elevate them. I believe this is where we saw Evolution, which was an all-women pay-per-view with WWE. Unfortunately, a lot of it is America slowly catching up to other people, or WWE catching up. TNA is known for having a great women's division for many years. Again, Japan's been doing it forever. Mexico's been doing it forever. I haven't really talked about it, but like intergender wrestling, where you have both men and women fighting each other, is fairly common on the Indies, in Mexico. I think there's some in Japan. But WWE used to have a little bit of it in the Attitude Era, but now they're definitely kind of like moving away from it as much as possible. But they were going to at least elevate women's wrestling to be at least trying to get it more to the level of popularity with everything else on the show. All right, so that brings us to kind of the last era that we're up to now, which is the pandemic to the Triple H era. You can't guess what happened in 2020. The pandemic. That changed a lot of things. During this era, you see, I mean, that's about 5 years now, but we saw like Becky Lynch continue to rise in popularity, Brock Lesnar still being popular, Bray Wyatt, Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, The New Day, Charlotte, Bayley, Sasha Banks, Finn Balor, Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes. The pandemic was an odd time for wrestling. They had a WrestleMania with no audience. They had weekly television with no audience. They had to change up their style because the microphones were right next to them. They tried to elevate people like Drew McIntyre, but it's always hard to tell what's working and what's not when there's no audience there. They continued to succeed, and we saw wrestling start taking an upturn. There were a couple ups and downs, whether that was Vince's interference with things that were working, because it is. Which leads us to the most recent WrestleMania was kind of the debut of the Triple H era. This is Triple H now being pretty much in charge of WWE as far as creative and a lot of things going. You're seeing the resurgence of people like Cody Rhodes showing up, Seth Rollins still being pretty prominently. Roman Reigns continues to dominate a lot of the scenes. The Rock coming back. So wrestling is seeing another boom right now as far as like popularity, injecting itself into a lot more other media. I mean, wrestlers have been in TV and movies forever, but you're seeing them more and more recognizable and crossovers and stuff like that. But that brings us to the most recent era. Oh gosh, here's your test. No, it's not really. We're gonna talk about some vocabulary. I know. Oh man, I really did not think a lot of this through. But yeah, some vocabulary, some things that you're going to hear when you're talking to wrestling fans or just in general. You might hear some terms that I want you to kind of know what you're hearing. If you hear something about an angle, and it's most likely referring to a fictional storyline. So like, oh, what's this angle about? Oh, it's about this guy not liking this guy's family, so they're fighting over it. So when you hear angle, it's a fictional storyline. Blading is also known as juicing, gigging, or getting color. It's when a wrestler intentionally cuts themselves to provoke bleeding. This is where they'll hide a small razor blade in their wrist tape, or the referee will hand them one, and they'll stick their forehead a few times, and they'll start bleeding to really sell, oh no, I got hit in the head. They have moved away from this for a number of reasons as much as possible. It still happens very rarely. More likely you're going to see something done the quote-unquote hard way, in which someone is actually hit so hard that they start to bleed, whether it's using like an elbow or they actually hit their nose, so they start bleeding from the nose or the mouth. That is more often when you see blood, but it still happens occasionally. Botch. Botch is something, usually a scripted moment or a spoken line, which does not go as planned due to a mistake. It's a mess up. You mess up, someone says you botched it. You slip on the ropes and fall, you botched it. If you meant to say suffering succotash and you mess that up, yeah, it's a botch. Botch has become a word used very often. So there's a lot of wrestlers that don't like the word because they're like, look, I got one shot to do this, and I do this 300 days a year in front of a live audience. Shut up. But it is a word that you'll hear. A bump is to fall to the ground or mat. So someone taking a bump is to fall. So if I fall on my back, I'm taking a back bump. If I fall on my front, I'm taking a front bump. Bury. This is a word that means to intentionally lower a wrestler's status in the eyes of fans. So this is where you often hear in the past that Triple H would bury someone. He would go, I need this person to not look good, so I'll make them lose all the time. And make them look like an idiot, make them look like they're weak, or whatever. That is someone burying someone. Whether that is corporate burying someone or another wrestler who has enough power or sway burying someone. Clean finish, or winning clean, or any kind of term to the word clean is a match ending without cheating. Meaning you pinned someone with a finisher and there was no shenanigans, you won clean. You try to get a clean victory to finish a feud because you don't want to be like, oh, I won with cheating. They're like, no, you're the good guy. That's not supposed to happen. Faction, a group of wrestlers who band together to protect each other during matches. This is different from a stable. A stable is someone is a group of people with a single leader. So, for example, what would be a good example of a faction versus a the Viking Raiders would be a faction. It's the three of them. They're all a team. Or the New Day would be a faction. The Wyatt family would be a stable because they are led by Bray Wyatt. Heat. Heat is a word that you'll hear a lot. It refers to both the crowd reaction and real life animosity. I was going to ask about them. Which one? The New Day? Or the Viking Raiders? Or the Wyatt family? The family. Yeah, I think they count as a stable because they are led by Bray Wyatt. But yeah, heat. Heat can refer to both crowd reactions and real-life animosity between those involved in professional wrestling, angle, or match. So, getting heat would be like, you can see it as cheap heat, which is like, oh, your local sports teams suck, and the crowd boos you. You're getting heat from the crowd for doing that. It's very cheap heat. You're cheating specifically in a match, and the crowd boos you for it. You get heat. Or if you are causing problems backstage, you'll have heat backstage because you're causing problems and people don't like you. Heat is a big word for news. They're like, oh no, who has heat backstage? kind of a thing. Jobber. Jobber is a wrestler who routinely loses in order to build the credibility of wrestlers. Sadly, if you are called jobber, a lot of times it means that you always lose and you kind of suck and you're just fed to other people. You might get the big new guy is debuting, so they send the jobber out there to lose to them. Some wrestlers have made their entire career being a jobber. That is what they do. That's what they are fine with, or that's what they got stuck with. You got some wrestlers who are a jobber for a while and or a short time. It really heavily depends. Kayfabe. This is a big word. I don't mean like long wise, but kayfabe is the presentation of professional wrestling as being an entirely legitimate or unscripted. This is where we're talking about things like the internet killed kayfabe, or someone is staying in kayfabe. Undertaker, big dark spooky guy, is known for trying to keep always be in character. So whenever you see him, he tries to stay in character to keep kayfabe alive. You're breaking kayfabe if you're, let's say you're playing a heel in a match and you make a kid cry on the side. You break your character to be like, no, it's fine. Watch, it's just TV. Everything's okay. You're breaking kayfabe. Some characters and wrestlers keep kayfabe alive as much as possible. MJF that we saw earlier under the heels banner. He is in character 24/7. You ever walk in and meet him, he is in character and he is a dick all the time. He lives and breathes in kayfabe. I'm sure there are times where he's not, but if you ever meet him, like, excuse me, on the street, he's going to be the jerk. It's just what he does. It just keeps kayfabe alive because that's how it used to be. To the point where you were such a villain, people try to stab you. It happens. But yeah, when we refer to kayfabe, it's referring to someone being in character, more or less. No sell. No sells to show no reaction to an opponent's offensive moves, a way to demonstrate endurance, appear invulnerable to pain, or illustrate masochistic tendencies, or initially to bury an opponent. I kind of touched on that briefly. You can have there are some examples of people who are no selling things like you're a big monster of a man and someone hits you with a chair but you don't react, you just turn around and like, oh, he no sold that chair shot to prove how big of a monster he is. Or you'll have it where one of the more famous ones was Triple H in his early days fought the Ultimate Warrior and he gave Ultimate Warrior his finisher. And Ultimate Warrior just stood up. He was like, you gave me your finisher. I don't care. I didn't feel it. And it was to make Triple H look bad. Because it was not really scripted. Another one is, I think it was Impact / TNA. Austin Aries lost a match. And as soon as he got pinned, he walked away. He rolled out of the ring, walked away, looked perfectly fine. Didn't show any signs of anything. Because he was very angry. Let's see, where were we? Over. Achieving desired crowd reaction with the audience buying into a performer or gimmick. When someone is over, they're popular. Or if they're trying to get something over, like their entrance or their music. Ad. Jeez, yeah, these ads seem to keep going, don't they? It's mad. It's Cleveland again. Oh, that's funny. Poor Cleveland. I mean, poor you. You're the one getting stuck with it. Check a few things before we come back. We're almost there. I don't know what we're going to do when we get there. Do we just go in the stream there? I don't know. We'll see. I didn't realize I was going to be... I was going to say, I didn't realize I was going to talk so much, but I knew I was going to talk so much. All right, you're back. Well, that's good to know. Where were we? Over, yeah. Over is means you're getting something popular, even if it's supposed to or not. You see this a lot with wrestlers, with their entrance or their song. It was like, man, is this song any good? But then the crowd starts getting into it, or someone's given a weird character, but then the character starts getting popular. The character is now over, or it's just, hey, this is a character, and people are like, we like this. It's over. So yeah, a lot of times you'll hear terms like getting over or trying to get over or putting over. It's usually trying to get something to become popular or to get a good crowd reaction out of it. A plant is a wrestler, stagehand, or paid actor who poses as a fan, usually seated in the front row of an event. This is where you're going to see when like a crowd member gets hit or pushed or like their sign is taken and torn to shreds. They can be a kid, they can be an adult, or they can be a quote-unquote stunt granny. That's a deep cut to something that only I will get, and that's fine. But yeah, this is where like Santino Marella that we mentioned earlier, that his debut was they were doing a show in Italy, and he was a front row person. They were like, "Wow, I'll take on any one of you to come beat this monster Umaga." And Santino was presented as a fan. They pulled him in, and he beat Umaga with some help, so he would be considered a plant. The wrestler going, I'm going to pick a kid in the ring or in the audience to come wrestle with me as my tag partner and win this match. And they go, you kid, come with me. And the kid is a referee's son that is told what to do. Granny, she was ruthless. Yeah, we're talking about Granny Gray from WWE game. The storyline is very true. But yeah, a plant is it can be any of those things. If it's like, it's someone backstage trying to do on a headset talking to someone and they get kicked in the face, they are not just a random coworker. They're probably a wrestler. One of the most famous ones that you'll see is Shawn Michaels kicking a man named Stan, where he's arguing with Triple H. Shawn Michaels turns to a guy in a headset and goes, hey, what's your name? Guy goes, Stan. Shawn Michaels super kicks him in the face and goes, see, I just kicked Stan. It's one of the greatest little clip in the world. But yeah, so that would have been a plant. Only other page of vocabulary, I promise. A pop is a cheer or positive reaction from the crowd. So let's say someone makes a surprise return or debut and the crowd explodes. That's a pop. You do a famous move or something that the crowd really likes and they cheer. That's a pop. Promo is an in-character interview or monologue. This is where when The Rock stands in the ring for a while and gives his whole speech and ends with, if you smell The Rock is cooking, it's a promo. Stone Cold Steve Austin doing a whole thing and ending with Austin 316 says, I just whooped your ass. Promo. The pipe bomb. Promo. All that kind of stuff. Is if a character has a monologue, it's considered a promo. Push. The worked rising of a wrestler's status in the eyes of the fan. If someone is getting a push, they are getting more popular, or they're being used better, or they are. It's the company going, make this guy win more, or make him used more prominently. This is where you'll see people refer to wrestlers going like, man, I wish they would get a push. It's because they want to see someone get more utilized or seen treated well. Ref bump, a scenario where the referee takes a bump and is, in kayfabe, knocked out temporarily or permanently. This usually occurs to allow a storyline to progress, such as a run-in by a third party turn or turn by a second. This is where you see it all the time where someone accidentally hits the ref, like they bump into them and the referee for some reason gets knocked out for like 10 minutes for some reason to allow the wrestlers to fight using weapons, and the referee can't disqualify them because he's unconscious because he got brushed. It is always a joke that a ref bump being unconscious forever for being touched by the lightest thing. Sometimes that referee is continued to use, as in they kind of, it's like they eventually come back to their senses and then do the 3 count, or that referee is knocked out and they send out another referee to replace them eventually. Ring rust is a detriment to a wrestling ability resulting from lack of practice during a hiatus. This is when someone makes a big return, like, oh man, they were injured for so long, or like, oh, this old legend's coming back for one more match. They'll often refer to them as having ring rust, to say like, oh man, they haven't done this in so long, they're not as good as it, or they have to knock off that rust to get back into it. Rope break, a break of a pin, count, or submission when a wrestler has their hands or feet on the rope or under the rope. This is usually how you'll have some wrestlers get out of submission when they're trying to crawl towards the rope, because if they get a hold of it, the referee tells the person doing the submission to let go. You'll sometimes see it as just a flop onto the rope when during a pin, or just getting their foot under the rope. This is always extremely annoying in the games when you're a little too close and the game goes rope break, and you're like, "Fuck you, game." This is a good one. Shoot. When a wrestler deliberately goes off script, either by making a candid comment or remarks during an interview, breaking kayfabe, or legitimately attacking an opponent. This does happen. A shoot means that it is unscripted. That's kind of what it means. Is they're just being real, and sometimes you see it in the shows, and you're like, oh gosh, is this a work or a shoot? We'll get to work in a second. But shoot just means it's real. And that's usually used in a lot of like the drama or the news or the journalism headlines of like, was this a real injury? Was this a shoot injury, or was this a not one? But yeah, so that's shoot. Spot. A spot is any planned action or series of actions in a match. You'll hear things referred to as spot fests or a botched spot. Anything that was supposed to happen where you're like, oh, you know what we should do? We should have Jeff Hardy hanging from the middle of the ring from the title belts, and we'll have Edge jump off the ladder and spear him in the air. That would be a spot. Yeah. A squash match is an extremely one-sided match. This is usually used for when a new wrestler is debuting. It's usually a new, very strong or very big wrestler where they squash someone. They beat the crap out of them in like 30 seconds and pin them. It happens usually to get someone over very quickly or to show how dominant someone is. A turn. A switch in alignment of a wrestler's character. Alignment. That's for you, Tragic. It involves a wrestler going from face to heel or vice versa. There are two types of turns. The hard turn, which occurs quickly and as an act of a surprise device, and the soft turn, gradual turn. Transitioning from face into heel is often called a heel turn, and the opposite is called a face turn. Now, this is usually when your character starts to get stale, or you're trying to find something to get work, or you're trying to create a new storyline. This is where something like, when we say like a hard turn for the quick one, it could be like, oh, these two friends, they fought each other really hard, and one of them won the match, and they're both together in the ring, and they're like, oh my gosh, we did so well, I'm so glad you won, but then immediately like changing and then beating up their friend. That would be a hard turn, usually going from face to heel, because they're beating up their friend. Whereas a soft turn might be something like, let's see, what would be a soft turn? We'll use Cody in AEW, where he was presented as a face, where he was like, I'm the good guy, I'm all American, I'm a legacy character, you guys love me. But then like he keeps winning, and people are getting tired of him, and he kind of leans into it. It was like, what? You don't like this? You guys have to love me. And he kind of turns into the Homelander persona that he achieved at a certain point, and it was kind of a gradual heel turn where he thinks he's the good guy, but the crowd's like, no, you're the bad guy, and he's like, nah, I don't believe you. You can get some things where, again, heel turn, face turn. You'll have sometimes where you have a is it called double turn? I think it's called a double turn. An example of this is Bret Hart and Steve Austin had a match where we saw that Steve Austin was a heel at the time, and Bret Hart was a face. And during the match, you saw that Bret Hart was getting frustrated. Austin was not giving up, and he was being perseverant. And it's an iconic shot of Steve Austin in the sharpshooter. So Bret Hart is trying to submit him. Steve Austin is bleeding from the forehead, screaming in pain. I think he eventually passes out. And people saw it as someone who was so defiant, who never wanted to give up. he kind of became this tough guy face, whereas Bret Hart had gotten frustrated and was just doing kind of things that were not really cool out of those frustrations, so he started to become a heel, and we saw that double turn. After talking about shoot, we have a work. A work is anything planned to happen or a rationalized lie, the opposite of shoot. So this is where like someone says like, "Oh, I hope your dead dad isn't ever look down on you," or I hope it's like your dead dad is in hell. But then that's cleared through the wrestlers. Go, okay, I want you to say something about my dad. Like, all right, cool. Or like, oh no, my injury, I injured my arm. It's a work that the arm's not really injured. It's planned. You can also use work to be methodically attacking a single part of the body. This is usually where it's someone like, oh, I'm going to work over your arm, so that way your arm is really weak, so when I apply my submission, you're going to tap faster. To deceive or manipulate the audience in order to elicit a desired response. Working someone is like, yeah, you go like, oh, look, I totally aren't, I'm not going to betray you. Look, I know we've had some differences, but I'm not going to betray you this time. And they spend weeks going, look, I'm not betraying you, we're friends now, and then betraying them, going, haha, I worked you, you thought I was real, or I was really not going to attack you. This is going to lead into things like worked shoot, where you combine the two. This is the phenomenon of a wrestler seemingly going off script, but revealing elements of out-of-universe reality, but actually doing so at the fully planned part of the show. One of the best examples that we see with this is the CM Punk pipe bomb. He sits on the stage with a microphone, and he delivers a promo, which we saw earlier was a monologue, where he starts talking about things like this company will be, it's like, I don't hate you, John Cena, who's in the ring at the time. I think you're great. You're just a better ass kisser than I am. So standard heel stuff. But then he starts talking about other companies. He's talking about like Vince needs to die, and move, so the company can move on. He's crossing back and forth between what is like in universe and then like behind the scenes stuff, and you're like, whoa, is he really doing this? But it's all planned out, but it feels like it shouldn't be, so they cut off his microphone to kind of really sell that it was like, man, he's not supposed to be on the microphone saying these things, but it's all planned out. So it's kind of, that one's one of those real like blur of realities. And finally, for vocabulary, I know there's a lot of vocabulary here. Is the dreaded X signal. This is a signal used by referees during a match to indicate that a wrestler is unable to continue and may need medical attention. The referee will cross their arms and, if necessary, point to the injured wrestler. This is where they make a big X above your head with your forearms. It is a signal to the back that I have someone who's hurt here. Get me the doctors out here. They are legitimately concussed. They have a broken leg. They tore a muscle. I need medical assistance. This is not a joke. This is not anything. This isn't someone selling an injury. This is someone who's hurt. However, many fans have now become aware of the significance of the signal, and with referees often now having more direct communication with producers in the back, it is now sometimes used in kayfabe to sell a storyline. So someone may get hurt, and now the producers backstage or the booker is like, ooh, the audience looks like they're starting to get kind of concerned, or they don't think this is real enough. Referee, throw up the X, make them think this is real. So they've kind of blurred that a bit. But yeah, that's it for vocabulary. Okay, so I swear, we are almost done here. I know I've done a lot of talking. I don't know how much people have been interested, but in the end, we return to the question of what is pro wrestling. And to answer that question, I have a quote. It's a little bit of a quote, but it is a very good quote. So I hope you guys enjoy this quote here. Pro wrestling is a love story. Pro wrestling, I can do this. I can actually give a good quote. Wrestling is not a love story. It's a fairy tale for masochists, a comedy for people who criticize punchlines, a fantasy most can't understand, a spectacle no one can deny. Lines are blurred, heroes are villains, budgets are cut, business is business. But it can also be a land where dead men walk, where honor makes you elite, where demons run for office, and rock bottom is a reason to rejoice. It's an escape, a reason to point the blame at anyone but yourself for 2 to 3 hours, an excuse to be a kid again, and nothing else matters except the moment we are in. Wrestling is not a love story, it's much more. It's hope. And in a world surrounded in hate, greed, and violence, a world where closure may never come, we all know a place that has hot and cold hope on tap, for better or worse. As a quote from Wyndon Bray Wyatt Rotunda, the late wrestler who died recently, and again, probably one of my favorite wrestlers. So, in conclusion, wrestling is hope. So that is my presentation on Pro Wrestling 101. Thanks. As a cheeky nod, the contact us is all my old wrestling characters that I portrayed once upon a time. So yes, that was a lengthy Pro Wrestling 101. It was a 2-hour class. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, so that is kind of an introduction. There's a lot of information there, I know. I went more in depth for a lot of things. But yes, crit hit. That is kind of a lot of, like, if you're trying to start watching wrestling tomorrow, some things that you'll notice or want to know or need to know. You'll pick up some jargon. You'll start to recognize when things are said, or you're like, oh, it's a heel. Or this is where you go like, oh, for VCW, I want to be a heel. It's like, all right, we can make you the bad guy. We can definitely do that kind of thing. But yeah, again, it's a very basic PowerPoint. It's been a long time since I've made one, but I've made sure to add plenty of visual aids. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Socket. Yeah. Words and stuff and things, and I've been talking for like 2.5 hours. I hope that you found it insightful. I hope you learned some things. Again, if there's more things that we would like to know, or if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. Again, there's always the option to do like a history of pro wrestling presentation. That will take a lot more research, I'm sure. I had thoughts. If anyone has any questions about things I've covered, or maybe I didn't cover that you'd like to know, feel free to ask them. Yeah, words and stuff. If you have people in your life that you're caring, if you have people in your life that you care about, make sure you tell them that you love them. I can't thank everyone enough, and I hope to see you guys next time. But until then, I will see you folks later. Bye-bye.